They called her nobody, a charity case, a pity hire, the librarian who got lucky. For 3 years, Isidore Navarro had listened to the whispers in the break room, the barely concealed smirks when she presented her research at board meetings, the way Sienna Ashford would talk over her like she was furniture that had learned to speak. But when their private jet screamed out of the sky over the Canadian Rockies, when metal shrieked and the world turned inside out, when her boss threw himself over her body and his eyes burned crimson in the chaos, Isadora discovered something the whispers had never prepared her for. Some people are invisible because they're waiting for the right moment to be seen. This is that moment. This is how a nobody saves a king. The clock in the archive read 11:47 when Isadora found the portrait. She had been cataloging acquisitions for the past 6 hours, her back aching from hunching over the authentication table, her eyes burning from the lamplight. The Blackwell building was silent at this hour. 43 floors below, Manhattan glittered like scattered diamonds, but up here in the restricted vault, there was only the whisper of climate control and the smell of old parchment. The painting had been misfiled, wedged between 2 Ottoman texts wrapped in cloth that had gone brittle with age. Isadora's hands trembled as she unfolded the fabric. The woman in the portrait stared back at her with her own eyes. Not similar eyes, not reminiscent of. Her exact eyes, the same moss-green shade with that ring of amber around the pupil that her grandmother used to say was a mark of their bloodline. The same slight upturn at the corners. The same dark hair that never quite behaved, falling in waves past bare shoulders. The woman wore a gown of deep crimson velvet, the bodice embroidered with gold thread and patterns that looked Spanish. Renaissance Spanish. Her neck was adorned with a collar of rubies and pearls. One hand rested on what looked like an illuminated manuscript. The other held a small wooden cross, but it was her expression that made Isadora's breath catch. The woman looked afraid. No, not afraid. Resigned. Like she knew something terrible was coming and had made peace with it. The brass plate at the bottom of the frame was tarnished green, but Isadora could make out the engraving. Catalina de Mendoza, Duchess of Cordoba, 1498, Mendoza, her grandmother's maiden name. The archive door opened behind her. Isadora spun, clutching the portrait to her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. Adrian Blackwell stood in the doorway. He was not a man who entered rooms. He manifested in them. One moment the space was empty, the next he filled it with a presence that seemed to pull all the air toward him. 6 feet of sharp angles and expensive tailoring. A face that looked like it had been carved from marble by someone who understood that beauty could be a weapon. Cheekbones that could cut glass. A jaw that suggested he had never smiled in his life. And eyes. Gray eyes that churned like storm clouds over a winter sea. Those eyes locked onto the portrait in Isadora's hands. Every muscle in his body went rigid. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Isadora had worked for Adrian Blackwell for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. In all that time, she had never seen him display emotion. He was a monolith, a statue. He spoke in clipped sentences about provenance and authentication. He signed off on her reports with a fountain pen that probably cost more than her annual salary. He had never once looked directly at her for more than 3 seconds. He was looking at her now, really looking, and something in those gray eyes was breaking. "Where did you find this?" His voice was low, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something that sounded like a man trying very hard not to drown. "Ottoman section, misfiled." Isadora's own voice came out steadier than she felt. "I was going to log it in the restoration queue. The frame needs work, and the varnish is—" "Who is she?" The question cut through her explanation like a blade. Isadora glanced down at the brass plate. "Catalina de Mendoza, Duchess of Cordoba, painted in—" "I can read the date, Miss Navarro." The use of her last name stung more than it should have. 3 years and he still maintained that wall of formality. Still kept her at arm's length like she was a stranger he had hired 5 minutes ago. "I don't know who she is, Mr. Blackwell, but—" She hesitated. "But?" He took a step forward, then another. He moved like water, each step deliberate and unnaturally smooth. "Mendoza was my grandmother's maiden name, and she—" Isadora turned the portrait so he could see it properly. "She looks exactly like me." The silence that followed was the kind that had weight, the kind that pressed down on your chest and made it hard to breathe. Adrian reached out. His hand hovered an inch from the painted surface, fingers trembling almost imperceptibly. In 3 years, Isadora had never seen him hesitate, never seen him unsure. "Pack it," he said finally, "carefully. We leave for Alaska tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., private airfield in Teterboro. Alaska, Mr. Blackwell, I have the Medici manuscripts scheduled for. Reschedule them. It was not a request. He turned and walked toward the door, his footsteps silent on the tile floor. No man that size should move that quietly. Mr. Blackwell? He paused but did not turn around. Who is she? Isidore asked again. For a long moment he said nothing. Then so quietly she almost missed it. Someone I failed. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Isidore stood alone in the archive, staring at the portrait of a woman who wore her face, who shared her name, who had died 528 years ago. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sienna Ashford. Heard you're going on a trip with the boss. How lucky for you. Some of us actually work for our opportunities. Isidore deleted it without responding. She had learned, over 3 years of whispers and sideways glances, that some battles were not worth fighting. Sienna wanted a reaction, wanted proof that her barbs landed. Isadora would not give her the satisfaction. Instead, she carefully wrapped the portrait back in its cloth, logged it in the transport manifest, and locked the vault behind her. On the subway home to her studio apartment in Queens, wedged between a man who smelled like cigarettes and a woman scrolling through her phone, Isadora pulled out her own device and searched. Catalina de Mendoza, Cordoba, 1498. The results were sparse. A few genealogy sites, a mention in a footnote of a book about Spanish nobility, a single line in a historical archive about the Duchess of Cordoba who had died of plague in the winter of 1499. No other portraits, no detailed biographies, just a name and a death date. But one link caught her eye, a blog post about Spanish noble houses and their rumored connections to the occult, specifically the House of Cordoba and its whispered association with creatures of the night. Isadora closed the browser. Ridiculous. She did not believe in ghost stories. But when she got home and unlocked the small, fireproof box where she kept her grandmother's few possessions, she found the journal exactly where she remembered it. Leather-bound, pages yellowed with age, written in a mix of Spanish and English in her abuela's careful handwriting. Isadora flipped to the entry she had read once, years ago, after her grandmother's funeral. The one she had dismissed as the ramblings of an old woman losing her grip on reality. Mi querida Isadora, the entry began. If you are reading this, I am gone, and there are things you must know about our blood. We are descended from the House of Mendoza, old Spanish nobility, but our line carries something older than titles, something dangerous. If you ever meet a man who looks at you like he has seen a ghost, run. Do not let him close. Do not trust his beautiful words or his sad eyes. Our blood is cursed, mija. It calls to them, the ones who walk in shadow, the ones who should not exist. And if one of them finds you, if he recognizes what you are, he will not let you go. Not ever. Isadora snapped the journal shut. She told herself it meant nothing. Her grandmother had been 93 when she died. She had confused past and present, had talked to people who were not there, had believed the old stories were real. But as Isadora packed her bag for Alaska, as she set her alarm for 4:30 in the morning, as she lay in bed staring at the water-stained ceiling of her apartment, she could not shake the image of Adrian Blackwell's face when he saw the portrait. The way he had looked at it like a man staring at his own grave. The private airfield at Teterboro was a study in understated wealth. No crowds, no security lines. Just a sleek black car that picked Isadora up at 5:15, a driver who did not speak, and a gate that opened for them like they owned the place, which technically Adrian Blackwell did. The Gulfstream waited on the tarmac, its white body gleaming in the pre-dawn light. Isadora had flown commercial twice in her life, once to her grandmother's funeral in Albuquerque, once to a conference in Boston where she had presented a paper on manuscript preservation that 7 people attended. This was not commercial. This was a flying mansion. Cream leather seats, burled walnut paneling, carpets so thick her shoes sank into it. A galley kitchen that probably had better equipment than her entire apartment. Windows the size of paintings. And at the back of the cabin, reading a book bound in what looked disturbingly like iron, sat Adrian Blackwell. He did not look up when she boarded, did not acknowledge her presence as she stowed her bag, did not speak as the pilots ran through their pre-flight checks. Isadora settled into a seat across the narrow aisle from him and pulled out her tablet. If he wanted silence, she would give him silence. She had a backlog of authentication requests to review. Work did not stop just because her boss had decided to drag her across the continent without explanation. The engine spooled up. The Gulfstream rolled forward, picking up speed, And then they were climbing into a sky that was just beginning to bleed pink at the edges. New York fell away beneath them. Isadora watched the city shrink to a grid of lights, then a smudge, then nothing as clouds swallowed the world. She pulled up the file on the Alaskan collection they were supposedly evaluating, a private library that had been sealed since the 1940s. The owner had died without heirs, and the estate had finally been cleared for auction. Blackwell Antiquities had been granted first access to catalog and acquire anything of historical significance. It was the kind of opportunity that would normally have Sienna Ashford throwing elbows to be on the team. Instead, it was just Isadora, and Adrian Blackwell, who still had not looked at her, and two pilots who were separated from the cabin by a closed cockpit door. The tablet screen blurred. Isadora blinked, realized she had been staring at the same paragraph for 10 minutes without reading a single word. She glanced across the aisle. Adrian had closed his book. He sat with unnatural stillness, hands folded in his lap, staring out the window at clouds that stretched to infinity. He had not moved in 20 minutes, had not shifted in his seat, had not so much as blinked. "Mr. Blackwell?" Nothing. "Adrian?" His head turned, slowly, like a statue coming to life. "You called me Adrian." It was the first thing he had said to her in 3 years that was not a work directive. Isadora faltered. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwell. I just wanted to ask about the Alaska collection. What specifically are we looking for?" "Manuscripts," and he said. "15th century, Spanish origin, anything related to the House of Cordoba." "Because of the portrait." "Yes." "Wait, Ray." The gray eyes fixed on her, and for a moment Isadora saw something in them that made her breath catch. Not anger, not irritation. Hunger. Not the physical kind, something deeper. The look of a man who had been alone in the dark for so long that he had forgotten what light looked like. "Because," Adrian said quietly, "I need to know if you are real." The plane jolted, not turbulence, something harder. The kind of impact that made the overhead bins rattle and sent Isadora's tablet sliding across the table. The cabin lights flickered. Adrian was on his feet before Isadora processed what was happening. He moved to the cockpit door, tried the handle. Locked. "Stay in your seat," he ordered. Another jolt. Harder this time. The Gulfstream tilted sharply to the left, and Isadora grabbed the armrest, her knuckles white. "What's happening?" Adrian did not answer. He was staring at the cabin door like he could see through it, like he was listening to something she could not hear. The intercom crackled to life. "Mr. Blackwell?" The pilot's voice was tight with controlled panic. "We have a problem. Both engines are failing. I need you to—" The intercom died. Every light in the cabin went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. The plane was not flying anymore. It was falling. Isadora knew this with the same certainty that she knew her own name. Knew it in the way her stomach dropped into her feet. Knew it in the high-pitched scream of wind outside the fuselage. Knew it in the way gravity stopped being a constant and became a suggestion. She looked at Adrian. He was looking back at her. And his eyes were glowing, not reflecting the emergency lights. Glowing from within. A deep crimson that should not exist in human irises. "Isadora," he said, and his voice was different. Deeper. Rougher. Like gravel over steel. "I need you to listen very carefully. When we hit, do not try to brace. Do not try to protect yourself. That will only make it worse. What are you? Close your eyes." The plane tilted vertical. Everything that was not bolted down went flying. Tablets, books, loose papers, all tumbling through the cabin like leaves in a hurricane. Isadora's seatbelt cut into her chest, and she could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything but watch as Adrian Blackwell unbuckled his own belt and stood up. In a falling plane, he stood up and walked toward her. Not stumbled, not fought against gravity. Walked, like he was strolling through a park on a Sunday afternoon. The oxygen mask dropped from the ceiling, dangling like nooses. Adrian reached Isadora's seat. "Close your eyes," he said again. And then he was on top of her, not in any romantic sense, in the way a shield covers what it protects. His body became a cage around hers, his arms braced on either side of her seat, his chest pressed against her face, and through the expensive fabric of his shirt, Isadora could feel nothing, no heartbeat, no rise and fall of breathing, just cold, hard muscle and the faint scent of something that reminded her of old books and ozone and copper. "Don't let go," Adrian whispered against her hair, and the world ended. The impact was not a sound. It was the cessation of all sound. The moment between heartbeats stretched into eternity. Metal shrieked. Trees exploded. The laws of physics asserted themselves with brutal finality. Isadora's consciousness did not fade. It shattered. Cold woke her. Not the chill of air conditioning or an open window, the kind of cold that had teeth, that bit down to bone and did not let go. Isadora opened her eyes. White. Everything was white. Snow piled high enough to bury a car, pine trees heavy with ice, a sky the color of old bruises. She was still in her seat, but the seat was no longer in the plane. It had been torn from the cabin floor and was now wedged into a snowbank at a 45-degree angle. Her seatbelt had somehow held. Her legs were intact. She could wiggle her toes. She was alive. The thought came with a wave of hysterical laughter that died in her throat when she tried to move, and pain exploded in her left shoulder. Dislocated. She knew the sensation from a rock climbing accident in college, the deep, grinding wrongness of a joint that had come apart. "Mr. Blackwell?" Her voice sounded tiny against the vast silence of the wilderness. No response. Isadora fumbled with the seatbelt buckle. Her right hand worked. Her left hung useless at her side. The buckle finally released, and she half fell, half rolled out of the seat into snow that came up to her knees. The wreckage was everywhere. The Gulf Stream had carved a path through the forest like a meteor. Trees were snapped off at their bases. The fuselage had broken into 3 pieces. The cockpit was gone. Just gone. Separated on impact and probably scattered across a mile of mountainside. The pilots. Oh God, the pilots. Isadora turned away before she could see anything that would haunt her forever. "Adrian!" She screamed at this time. Screamed until her throat was raw. Screamed until the mountains threw her voice back at her in mocking echoes. "I am here." Isadora spun so fast she slipped on the ice, her bad shoulder connecting with the ground. White-hot agony searing through her nervous system. She gasped, tried to breathe through it, failed. Strong hands gripped her good arm, lifted her upright with effortless strength. Adrian Blackwell stood before her, and he was immaculate. Not a scratch on his face, not a bruise on his pale skin, not a tear in his suit. He looked like he had just stepped out of a board meeting, not a plane crash that had obliterated a $40 million aircraft. "You," Isadora managed through gritted teeth, "are not human." "No," Adrian agreed, "I am not." He knelt in the snow in front of her, his gray eyes level with hers, and there was something in his expression that looked almost like apology. "Your shoulder is dislocated. I can fix it, but it will hurt. Everything already hurts. This will be worse." Before Isadora could respond, before she could brace herself, Adrian's hands found the joint, one palm against her shoulder blade, the other gripping her upper arm. "On 3, he said. 1. He did not get to 3. He moved with surgical precision, rotating and pulling in one smooth motion, and Isadora heard the pop before she felt it before she screamed before the world turned gray at the edges. She sagged forward. Adrian caught her. For the second time in an hour, she found herself pressed against his chest, and for the second time there was no heartbeat, no warmth, just the cold, unyielding solidity of something that looked human but was not. "Breathe," he instructed. His voice rumbled through his chest into hers. "The pain will fade." It did, slowly. The sharp agony dulled to a deep ache. Isadora could move her arm again, though it felt like it had been beaten with a hammer. She pulled back, looked up at him. "What are you?" Adrian helped her stand, then released her and took a step back, putting distance between them. "The pilots?" he asked instead of answering. "The cockpit is gone. They're—" Isadora's voice broke. "They didn't make it." "No, they did not." No emotion, no grief, just cold statement of fact. Isadora wanted to be angry at his indifference, but she was too cold, too hurt, too shocked to manage anything beyond numb acceptance. "Where are we?" "Canadian Rockies, approximately 40 miles from the nearest town. No cell service, no emergency beacon." Adrian scanned the tree line with those unsettling gray eyes. "The crash will be reported when we miss our flight plan check-in. Search and rescue will deploy. But in this terrain, in this weather, it will take them days to find the wreckage." "Days," Isadora repeated dully. "We cannot stay here. The jet fuel is leaking. If it ignites," he did not finish the sentence. "Did not need to." "Can you walk?" Isadora tested her weight on both legs. Everything hurt, but nothing felt broken. "Yes." "Then we need to move. Now." He turned and began walking into the forest, his expensive Italian shoes sinking into the snow, his suit jacket doing absolutely nothing to protect against the sub-zero temperature. But he was not shivering, was not hugging himself for warmth, was not showing any sign that the cold affected him at all. Isadora took one last look at the wreckage of the Gulf Stream, at the scattered debris that represented two lives ended too soon, and followed Adrian Blackwell into the wilderness. She did not have a choice. He was the only thing standing between her and death. Even if he was not entirely alive himself, they walked for 3 hours. Adrian broke the trail, his footsteps unnaturally even, his pace never faltering. Isadora struggled behind him, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her legs burning with exertion, her shoulder throbbing with every step. The forest was silent, too silent. No birds, no wind in the trees. Just the crunch of snow under their feet and the sound of Isadora's labored breathing. Adrian never looked back to see if she was keeping up, never slowed his pace, never offered to help. It should have made Isadora angry, should have made her demand he show some basic human decency. But there was something in the rigid set of his shoulders that stopped her. Something in the way he held himself apart that suggested he was fighting a battle she could not see. The sun was setting when he finally stopped. Not a gradual halt. One step he was moving, the next he was still, his head tilted to the side like he was listening to something. Here, he said. Here was an overhang of rock that formed a shallow cave, not deep enough to be called proper shelter, but enough to block the wind, enough to keep the worst of the snow off, enough to survive the night. Maybe. Wait here, Adrian ordered, and then he was gone. Not walked away. Gone. One moment he was standing in front of her, the next the forest had swallowed him without a sound. Isadora sank down onto a relatively dry patch of stone and pulled her knees to her chest, trying to conserve what little body heat she had left. Her fingers were numb, her toes felt like blocks of ice. The sun was almost gone, and with it went any warmth the day had offered. She was going to die here. The thought came with surprising clarity. No panic, no terror, just cold, logical assessment. Even if search and rescue found the crash site tomorrow, even if they somehow tracked her and Adrian through 40 miles of wilderness, she would not last the night. Not in these temperatures, not with no shelter, no fire, no supplies. She closed her eyes, thought about her studio apartment in Queens, about the stack of unread books on her nightstand, about the half-finished authentication report still on her work computer, about Sienna Ashford reading the news of her death and probably feeling nothing but relief that the competition was gone, about her grandmother's journal and its warning. If one of them finds you, he will not let you go. Not ever. A sound made her eyes snap open. Adrian emerged from the trees carrying an armload of branches that would have taken 2 men to lift. He dropped them in a pile in front of the overhang without any visible effort. How did you, Isadora started. Do you have a lighter? Adrian interrupted. I don't smoke. Neither do I. He crouched by the wood pile, selected 2 pieces of dry bark, and began rubbing them together. His hands moved in a blur. Faster than human hands could move. Fast enough that Isadora could not track the individual motions. Fast enough that friction became heat, became smoke, became a tiny orange ember that he gently transferred to a nest of dried needles. Within seconds, fire bloomed. Within a minute, the pile of wood was crackling cheerfully, throwing heat and light into the gathering darkness. Isadora stared. You can't be real, she whispered. Adrian fed another branch into the flames. The firelight played across his face, deepening the hollows beneath his cheekbones, turning his eyes into pools of liquid shadow. I am very real, Isadora. Her name, he had used her first name. In 3 years, he had never called her anything but Miss Navarro. What are you? She asked for the 3rd time. This time he answered. I am old, he said quietly. Older than this country. Older than the trees around us. I have lived through the rise and fall of empires. I have watched centuries turn to dust. He looked at her across the fire, and in his eyes, Isadora saw the weight of all those years. The endless, crushing loneliness of watching everyone you have ever known grow old and die while you remain unchanging. I am the last of my kind, Adrian continued, the last pure blood of the Cordoba line, and I am exactly what your grandmother's journal warned you about. Isadora's heart stuttered. You read my grandmother's. I did not need to read it. I can smell the age on you, the old blood. You are descended from Catalina de Mendoza, from the woman I loved, the woman I married, the woman who died in my arms 527 years ago. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped under the weight of snow. You're insane, Isadora said, but she did not believe it. Could not believe it. Not when he had walked through a falling plane. Not when he had moved faster than thought. Not when he sat in sub-zero temperatures without shivering and built fire with his bare hands. I wish I were, Adrian said. Insanity would be a mercy. He stood up, moved to the edge of the overhang, and stared out into the dark forest. "You should sleep," he said without looking at her. "I will keep watch." "For what?" "For things that think we are prey." It was not a comforting answer, but when Isadora curled up on the cold stone as close to the fire as she dared, when exhaustion finally dragged her under, despite the fear and the cold and the impossibility of everything, her last conscious thought was of Adrian Blackwell standing at the mouth of the cave, still as a statue, silent as death, watching the darkness with eyes that knew exactly what lurked there, because he was one of them. And somewhere in the back of her mind, in the place where her grandmother's warning still echoed, Isadora understood. She had been found, and there would be no running. Not anymore. Dawn came cold and gray. Isadora woke to the sound of silence. Not the peaceful kind, the watchful kind, the kind that made prey animals freeze in the underbrush and wait for the predator to pass. She opened her eyes. The fire had burned down to embers. The overhang was exactly as she remembered. The snow outside glowed with the pale light of early morning, and Adrian Blackwell stood in the exact same position he had occupied when she fell asleep. He had not moved, had not sat down, had not closed his eyes. 6 hours, and he had stood there like a sentinel carved from stone, watching the darkness with the patience of something that had all the time in the world. Because he did. All the time in the world. The realization settled over Isadora like a physical weight. Everything her grandmother had written, everything the old stories whispered, everything that should not exist, all of it was standing 10 feet away in a $1,000 suit that had somehow survived a plane crash without a single wrinkle. "You did not sleep either," Adrian said without turning around. His voice was rougher than yesterday, strained, like he was fighting to keep it level. "How did you know?" "Your breathing. It has been irregular for the past 20 minutes. The breathing of someone pretending to rest while their mind races." Now he did turn, and Isadora's breath caught. He looked worse, not injured, not sick, but diminished somehow. The skin stretched tighter over his cheekbones. The hollows beneath his eyes had deepened to bruises. His lips, which had been pale yesterday, were now almost colorless. "We need to move," he said. "Follow the slope downward. Water always flows down. If we find a stream, we follow it. Streams become rivers. Rivers lead to people." "When did you last eat?" Isadora asked. The question hung in the air between them. Adrian's jaw tightened. "That is not your concern. You look like you're starving." "I am always starving, Isadora. That is the nature of what I am. The question is whether I can control it." He turned back to the forest. "And right now, the answer is yes. Barely. So we need to find you food and water before that answer changes." The way he said it, the flat certainty, the complete lack of reassurance. He was not trying to comfort her. He was stating fact. He was dangerous, and they both needed to acknowledge that reality. Isadora pushed herself to her feet. Every muscle screamed. Her shoulder felt like someone had driven nails through the joint. Her legs trembled with exhaustion that 8 hours of fitful sleep had not touched. But she was alive, for now. "Let's go," she said. They walked. The forest was a cathedral of white and green, pines that stretched toward a sky they could not see through the canopy, snow that muffled every sound, cold that bit through Isadora's jacket like it was made of paper. Her stomach cramped with hunger. Her mouth was dry, despite the snow she had tried to eat. Her feet were numb in shoes that were designed for New York sidewalks, not wilderness survival. Adrian moved ahead of her, breaking trail through drifts that sometimes came up to his waist. He should have been struggling, should have been gasping for air in the thin mountain atmosphere. Instead, he glided through the terrain like it was nothing. Like gravity was a suggestion he had chosen to ignore. 2 hours passed. 3. The sun climbed higher, but brought no warmth. Isadora fell twice. The second time she could not get up, could not make her legs work, could not do anything but kneel in the snow and try to remember why she was supposed to keep fighting. Adrian appeared beside her. He did not offer his hand, did not touch her. Just stood there, a shadow against the white, waiting. "I can't," Isadora whispered. "I need to rest, just for a minute. If you rest now, you will not get up again." "Then maybe that's okay." "It is not okay." His voice cracked. Actually cracked. The first sign of real emotion she had heard from him. "Catalina gave up. She let the fever take her. She stopped fighting. And I had to watch her die because I was too much of a coward to turn on her. To make her what I am. I will not watch you die too." Isadora looked up at him. The mask had slipped. For just a moment, she saw past the cold CEO, past the ancient vampire, past all the walls he had built over 700 years. She saw a man who was breaking. "Then help me," she said. Adrian closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were glowing. Not the faint red she had seen on the plane, deep crimson, the color of fresh blood. "I cannot," he said. "If I touch you right now, if I let myself get that close, I will not be able to stop. Do you understand? I am so hungry that I can hear your heartbeat from here, can smell the blood in your veins, can taste it in the air every time you exhale." He took a step back. "So get up, Isadora, get up and walk, or die here. Those are your only options." It was cruel. It was exactly what she needed. Anger flared in her chest, hot and bright, burning through the exhaustion. She grabbed a low-hanging branch and hauled herself upright, her legs shaking but holding. "You are a bastard," she said. "Yes," Adrian agreed, "I am." They kept walking. Another hour, and then Isadora heard it. Water. The sound of running water cutting through the silence like a promise. They stumbled down an embankment and found a stream. Not frozen, moving fast enough that the current kept it liquid despite the temperature, clear as glass and cold enough to hurt. Isadora fell to her knees at the edge and drank. The water tasted like stone and ice, and the best thing she had ever put in her mouth. She drank until her stomach cramped, drank until she could not hold anymore. When she finally sat back, gasping, Adrian was watching her with an expression that looked almost like hunger. Not for blood, for the simple act of drinking blood, for the basic human need he no longer had. "When did you last drink anything?" Isadora asked. "Water, I mean." 1793, Adrian said. "Or thereabouts." It stopped appealing after the first century. The casual way he said it, like discussing the weather, 1793, 233 years ago. Isadora's mind could not process it, could not fit that much time into any framework that made sense. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "Being human?" Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then, "Every single day." A sound echoed through the trees. Not wind, not water. A low, rumbling growl that came from somewhere deep in the forest. Somewhere close. Adrian's head snapped toward the sound, his body going perfectly still. "Get behind me," he said quietly. "What is it?" "Bear." The word was barely out of his mouth when the creature emerged from the undergrowth. Grizzly. 8 feet tall when it reared up on its hind legs. 1,000 pounds of muscle and fur and teeth. Small eyes filled with animal intelligence and territorial rage. It had smelled them, or heard them, or simply decided that this stretch of river belonged to it and they were trespassing. The reason did not matter. What mattered was the way it dropped to all fours and charged. Isadora screamed. Adrian moved. He did not run toward her, did not try to put more distance between himself and the bear. He ran at it, straight at a charging grizzly, unarmed, in a business suit. Isadora thought she was watching him commit suicide. She was wrong. The bear swiped at him with a paw the size of a dinner plate, claws that could tear through a car door extended from the massive paw. Adrian ducked under the swing, moved inside the bear's reach, and grabbed it. His hands found purchase in thick fur. His legs braced against the ground. And then, with a sound that was not human, a hiss that came from somewhere ancient and primal, he lifted. The bear left the ground. 1,000 pounds of apex predator, lifted like it weighed nothing, and thrown. The grizzly hit a tree trunk 10 feet away with a crack that echoed through the valley. It slumped to the ground, dazed, and for a moment Isadora thought it was over. The bear scrambled to its feet, shook its massive head, and ran. Not toward them. Away. Fleeing from the small man in the expensive suit like he was something worse than death. Because he was. Adrian stood in the snow, breathing hard, the first time Isadora had seen him breathe at all. And when he turned to face her, the mask was completely gone. His eyes were not just glowing, they were burning. Crimson light bleeding from pupils that had contracted to pinpoints. His mouth was slightly open. And his teeth. Oh God, his teeth. 2 fangs had extended past his lips, long, sharp, gleaming white against the pale pink of his gums. This was not a man. This was a predator wearing a man's shape. "Isadora." His voice was gravel over broken glass. "You need to run. Now." She should have run. Every survival instinct screamed at her to turn and sprint into the forest, to put distance between herself and the monster in front of her. But she had spent 3 years being invisible, being dismissed, being told she was not worth noticing. And this creature, this impossible, terrifying thing, had seen her, had protected her, had walked through a plane crash and carried her survival on his shoulders because he could not bear to watch someone who looked like his dead wife give up. So instead of running, Isadora took a step forward. "Adrian," she said. Her voice shook but held. "Look at me. I am looking at you." The words came out strangled. "I am looking at you, and all I can see is blood. All I can hear is your heart, and all I can smell is—" He cut himself off with a sound that was half sob, half snarl. "When did you last feed?" "6 months." "That's not possible. You'd be dead." "I should be. I have been trying to starve it out. The hunger, the need. I thought if I denied it long enough, if I proved I did not need blood, I could be—" His voice broke. "Human. I could be human again." Isadora understood then. The isolation, the distance, the way he had kept her at arm's length for 3 years. He had been trying to protect her, not from danger, from himself. "You can't starve yourself into humanity," she said softly. "I know, I have known for 200 years. But I keep trying anyway because the alternative is admitting that this is all I will ever be. A monster, a creature, something that preys on what it once was." The fangs retracted slightly as he spoke. The glow in his eyes dimmed. He was fighting it, fighting himself, and losing. "How long before you lose control?" Isadora asked. "Hours, maybe less. The fight with the bear took—" He swayed slightly, caught himself. "I should not have done that. Should have let it kill you. It would have been faster than what happens when I—" "Stop!" Isadora closed the distance between them. Adrian flinched back like she had struck him. "Do not come closer," he warned. "I am barely holding on. If you—" "My grandmother's journal," Isadora interrupted. "It said, 'Our blood calls to you, to your kind.' What did that mean?" "Catalina was turned," Adrian said through gritted teeth. "For one night, I turned her to save her from the plague, but she begged me to let her die human. So I did. I gave her a serum that reversed the transformation before it completed. It killed her, but she died human." He looked at Isadora with eyes that had seen centuries of regret. "Your blood carries her DNA. Exact match. Like she was cloned 500 years later. And vampire blood, pure blood like mine, can sense its own kind. Even diluted, even dormant. You are not vampire, but you carry vampire potential in every cell." "So I'm what?" Isadora tried to process. "Some kind of genetic echo?" "You are everything I have been searching for and everything I should run from." Adrian took another step back, hit a tree, had nowhere left to go. "You are the worst possible temptation wrapped in the face of the woman I loved, and I am too weak to resist much longer." Isadora looked at him, really looked, saw the way his hands trembled, the way his jaw was clenched so tight she could hear her teeth grinding, the way every muscle in his body was locked in a battle with itself. He was not a monster. He was a man trying desperately not to become one, and he was going to lose. Unless— Isadora rolled up her sleeve. "What are you doing?" Adrian's voice was sharp with panic. "Giving you a choice." She held out her wrist. The skin was pale in the cold. The veins underneath were blue highways carrying the blood that he needed. "You can wait until you go feral and take it by force. Or you can take it now, while you still have control, while it can still mean something other than violence." "I cannot." But his eyes were locked on her wrist, on the pulse that beat steadily beneath the surface. "If I taste you, if I know what you taste like, I will never be able to stop wanting it." "Then don't stop wanting it," Isadora said. "Want it. Take it. But take it as a gift, not as prey." "Why?" The question came out as a broken whisper. "Why would you do this?" "Because 3 years ago, you hired me when no one else would. You gave me a chance when everyone said I was not worth the risk. You saw something in me that I had stopped seeing in myself." She stepped closer, close enough that he could reach out and touch her if he wanted. "You saved my life yesterday. Twice. Let me return the favor." Adrian's resistance crumbled like a sandcastle in the tide. He reached for her wrist with shaking hands, held it like it was made of glass, like one wrong move would shatter everything. "This will hurt," he warned. "I know. And afterward there will be a connection between us, something you will feel, that will not break. Ever." "I know," Isadora said again, though she did not know, could not know, was walking blind into something that would change her forever. But she was doing it anyway. Adrian lifted her wrist to his lips. He did not strike immediately. First, he pressed a kiss to her pulse point. Gentle. almost reverent, a silent apology for what came next. Then his fangs pierced her skin. Isadora gasped. There was pain, sharp and bright for just a moment, but it faded almost instantly, replaced by something else. Warmth. It started at the bite and spread through her bloodstream like whiskey, like sunlight, like coming in from the cold and standing in front of a fire. Adrian drank. She could feel it. The pull. The rhythmic draw of blood from her veins into his mouth. Could feel the way his hands steadied on her arm, the way his breathing, which had been labored and irregular, smoothed out. He was coming back to himself. With every swallow, he became less monster and more man. And Isadora felt something else. Him. Not physically, mentally, emotionally. A presence in the back of her mind that had not been there before. Aware of her the way you are aware of your own heartbeat. Constant, undeniable. The bond he had warned about. It clicked into place like a lock finding its key. Adrian pulled back with a gasp. His eyes were no longer red. They were gray again. Storm gray. Human gray. He pressed his thumb to the bite mark on her wrist, and Isadora watched in fascination as his saliva, mixed with her blood, made the wound seal. Not just stop bleeding, heal. Completely. Like they had never existed. That's impossible, she breathed. No, Adrian's voice was steady again. Strong. That is what I am. What we are now. He was still holding her wrist, still kneeling in the snow in front of her. And there were tears on his face. Actual tears. Red tears that traced down his cheeks like bleeding wounds. I have walked this earth for 723 years, Adrian whispered. I have known emperors and artists, have watched civilizations rise and fall, have drunk from thousands of vessels and felt nothing but the satisfaction of hunger sated. But you, his voice broke. Your blood does not just feed me, Isadora. It reminds me what it felt like to be alive. He pressed his forehead to her hand. His shoulders shook. The Vampire King was weeping. And Isadora, who had been told her entire life that she was nobody, that she was worthless, that she was only valuable if she made herself useful. Isadora reached down and stroked his dark hair with her free hand. Then live, she said softly. Stop trying to die. Stop trying to be something you're not. Just live. With me. For however long we have. Adrian looked up at her, and for the first time in 3 years, he smiled. It transformed his face. Made him look younger. Almost human. Almost. We should keep moving, he said, standing, before the bears come back. Do you think they will? No, after what just happened. Every predator in a 5-mile radius is finding somewhere else to be. He offered his hand. Can you walk? Isadora took it. His skin was still cold, still lacked the warmth of living flesh. But it was not death cold anymore. Not corpse cold. Her blood had brought him closer to life. They followed the stream. Adrian moved differently now, lighter, faster. The desperate edge that had haunted him was gone. He was still dangerous, but he was no longer starving. Tell me about Catalina, Isadora said after an hour of walking. Adrian was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then, she was a duchess. I was a soldier in her father's service. We should never have spoken to each other. But she used to come to the library where I studied in secret. I was vampire even then, newly turned, trying to learn what I had become. She found you. She found me reading a text on blood diseases, asked why a soldier cared about medicine. I told her I was sick. She said she would help me find a cure. He smiled at the memory. She had no idea the cure she was looking for did not exist, that I was the disease. When did you tell her? On our wedding night. I could not, he swallowed. I could not consummate the marriage without her knowing what I was, what touching me meant. She did not run, did not scream. She asked if I had killed anyone. I said no. She asked if I wanted to. I said every day. She asked if I would. I said not if it meant losing her. And she believed you. She married me, loved me for 15 years. And when the plague came, when she was dying, she begged me to turn her, to make her like me so we could have forever. But you didn't. I did, Adrian corrected. For one night she was vampire, and she hated it, hated the hunger, hated the cold, hated that she could hear her servants' hearts and wanted to tear into them. She begged me to let her die human, so I gave her the serum, and it killed her, painlessly, peacefully. She went to sleep in my arms and never woke up. Isadora's heart ached. I'm sorry. Do not be. She made her choice. She chose her humanity over immortality, over me. And I have spent 500 years wondering if I was selfish for turning her in the first place. If I stole her death from her, you loved her. I still love her. Adrian looked at Isadora. And that is the problem, because you are not her. You wear her face, carry her blood. But you are Isadora Navarro, your own person. And I do not know if what I feel when I look at you is real or just the echo of something I lost. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to her, and it hurt, but it was also fair. Then we figure it out, Isadora said. After we survive this. If we survive this. A sound cut through the forest. Mechanical, growing louder. Helicopter. Adrian's expression went from relieved to wary in a heartbeat. That is not search and rescue, he said. How do you know? Because search and rescue does not fly this low, does not move this deliberately. That is a hunter's pattern. Who would be hunting us? Adrian's jaw tightened. People who know what I am. People who want what I am worth. He grabbed Isadora's hand and pulled her behind a cluster of massive boulders. They crouched low, hidden from the sky, but with a clear view of the clearing beyond. The helicopter descended, black, unmarked, military grade. Men rappelled down on ropes before it even touched ground. 6 of them. Tactical gear. Weapons that looked far too advanced for simple search and rescue. And in the middle of them, stepping down from the helicopter like she was descending from a throne, was Sienna Ashford. Isadora's breath stopped. Sienna looked nothing like the polished corporate climber who had spent 3 years making Isadora's life miserable. She wore tactical pants and a heavy jacket. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and she was smiling. Not a friendly smile, a victorious one. Spread out, Sienna ordered the men. Thermal showed 2 heat signatures by the river. Blackwell will try to run. The girl is expendable. One of the men, older, gray-haired, with the bearing of a doctor, shook his head. The girl is not expendable, he said. His voice carried across the clearing. Dr. Voss will want her blood tested. If Blackwell drank from her, she's worth more than him. Sienna's smile widened. Even better. Bring them both. Alive if possible. Dead if necessary. Blackwell is worth 50 million either way. Isadora turned to Adrian, her heart hammering. Sienna sold us? She whispered. Adrian's face was carved from stone. Yes. The question is to whom? Does it matter? Very much. Different buyers want different things. Some want to study me. Some want to drain me. Some want to weaponize me. His eyes tracked Sienna's movements, and if Sienna Ashford is involved, she is getting something in return. Money, power, position. She has always wanted my job. Adrian's voice was cold, lethal, and now she will get it. Because if I die in this wilderness, my will names you as heir. And if you die with me, the board votes, and Sienna is next in line. The pieces fell into place. This was not just about money. This was a corporate assassination dressed up as tragedy. What do we do? Isadora asked. You run. I will draw them off. Lead them away from... I am not leaving you. Isadora, no didictum. She grabbed his jacket. You said the connection does not break. So if you die, I die. If I run, you run. Adrian looked at her like she had just offered him the sun, but they were too late. A net launched from the trees, silver mesh that glowed faintly in the dying light. It hit Adrian squarely in the chest, wrapped around him like a living thing, and where it touched his skin, smoke rose. He screamed, actual screaming, not the controlled hiss from earlier. Raw agony. The silver was burning him. 4 men emerged from cover, weapons trained on Adrian as he thrashed. Every movement made the net tighten, made the burning worse. Adrian! Isadora lunged toward him. A hand grabbed her arm, jerked her back. Sienna. Hello, Isadora, she said pleasantly. Surprise? Isadora tried to pull free. Sienna's grip was iron. Let me go. In a minute. First, Sienna turned to the gray-haired man. Dr. Voss, take a sample. Dr. Voss approached with a syringe. He grabbed Isadora's other arm, found a vein, and drew blood with practiced efficiency. Isadora barely felt it. All her attention was on Adrian, who had stopped thrashing and was now lying still in the silver net. His breathing labored. His skin blistered where the metal touched. Why, she asked Sienna. Why would you do this? Because I'm tired of being second best, Sienna said simply. Tired of watching you get opportunities you didn't earn. Tired of Adrian treating you like you're special when you're just a librarian who got lucky. So you sold us to what? Vampire hunters? To the syndicate. Sienna's smile was razor sharp. They pay very well for pure blood specimens. 50 million for Adrian, and apparently, she nodded at Dr. Voss, who was examining the blood sample with a handheld device. You're worth even more. Dr. Voss looked up, his eyes wide. Catalina genome, positive match, active vampire antibodies. What does that mean? Sienna demanded. It means, Voss said slowly, that this woman's blood can create daywalkers. Vampires immune to sunlight. If we synthesize this, he looked at Isadora like she was the Holy Grail. We could build an army. Sienna's expression shifted from triumph to greed. Take them both, she ordered. The men moved to comply, and Isadora, watching them approach, watching Adrian struggle weakly against the net that was killing him, felt something inside her shift. No, she had spent 3 years being invisible, being pushed aside, being told she was not enough, not anymore. Sienna wanted her gone so she could take everything Isadora had fought for. Fine, let her try. Isadora stomped on Sienna's instep with every ounce of strength she had left. Sienna yelped, her grip loosening just enough. Isadora tore free and ran. Not away from Adrian, toward the tree line, toward the tracks she had seen earlier. Tracks that were fresh, massive. Paw prints in the snow that were bigger than her hand. Mountain lion. The grizzly had run from Adrian. But a mountain lion was an ambush predator, a creature that did not fear, that hunted anything that moved, and Isadora was about to give it a reason to hunt. Stop her! Sienna screamed. Gunfire cracked through the forest. Isadora dove behind a tree, bark exploding above her head. She scrambled forward on hands and knees, following the tracks, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. There, 50 yards away, a tawny shape on a rock ledge. Massive, muscular, watching her with yellow eyes that reflected the fading sunlight. Isadora pulled off her jacket, the one that Adrian had given her, the one that smelled like him in smoke and blood, and waved it. The mountain lion's ears flattened. Come on, Isadora whispered, come and get it. She threw the jacket toward the clearing where the men were dragging Adrian toward the helicopter. And then she ran parallel to the tracks, making as much noise as possible. Breaking branches, kicking snow, screaming. The mountain lion launched from its perch, not after her, after the movement, after the noise, after the humans invading its territory. Chaos erupted. Men shouted, guns fired. The helicopter pilot tried to lift off, and Isadora sprinted back to Adrian. He was barely conscious. The silver net had burned through his shirt, the skin underneath angry and blistered. Isadora grabbed the net. Pain exploded in her hands. The silver burned her too, but nothing like what it did to Adrian. She could hold it, could pull. Come on, she gasped. We have to go, now. Adrian's eyes fluttered open, crimson again, fading to gray. You came back, he whispered. Of course I came back. You idiot. We're bonded, remember? She ripped the net off him with strength she did not know she had. Adrenaline. All of it poured into her muscles as she hauled him upright. He leaned on her, his weight nearly crushing, and they stumbled into the forest. Behind them, the mountain lion roared. Men screamed. Gunfire became sporadic, desperate, and Isadora did not look back. She just ran, half dragging, half carrying a vampire king through snow that had become her enemy and her salvation in equal measure. They did not stop running until the sounds faded. Did not stop until Adrian's legs steadied beneath him. Did not stop until they were miles away and the forest was silent again. Only then did Isadora let herself collapse. Adrian caught her, lowered her gently to the ground. You saved me, he said, wonder in his voice. You actually saved me. You saved me first, Isadora managed. Her hands were burned, blistered. They hurt almost as much as her shoulder had. Adrian took them in his own, brought them to his lips, and licked the burns. Isadora watched in amazement as his saliva healed her skin. Slower than it had healed the bite mark, but still healing, the angry red fading to pink, the blisters smoothing out. We need to keep moving, Adrian said. They will regroup, come after us again. Can you walk? I can do more than walk. He pulled her to her feet. Hold on to me. What? Adrian scooped her into his arms like she weighed nothing, and ran. Not human speed, vampire speed. The forest blurred around them. Trees became streaks. The world became wind and motion in the impossible sensation of flying through the snow without wings. Isadora buried her face in his chest and held on. When Adrian finally stopped, they were standing on a ridge overlooking a valley. Below, lights twinkled in the distance. Civilization. We made it, Isadora breathed. Not yet. Adrian set her down gently. Down there are people, questions, hospitals, and eventually Sienna will spin a story, will make herself the victim, will take everything. Then we get there first, Isadora said. We tell the truth. Will they believe us? Isadora looked at him, at the vampire who had protected her, fed from her, bonded with her, at the man who was more human in his honesty than anyone she had ever met. They will believe me, she said, because I have proof. She pulled out her phone. Shattered screen, but still working, still recording. The audio file was 4 minutes long, Sienna Ashford's voice, crystal clear. Take them both. Blackwell is worth $50 million either way. Adrian stared at the phone like it was a miracle. You recorded her. I recorded her. For the first time since the crash, since the blood bond, since everything had gone to hell, Adrian Blackwell laughed. It was a beautiful sound. Then let us go ruin her life, he said. And together they walked down the mountain toward the lights, toward answers, toward war, because Sienna had made a mistake. She had underestimated the nobody, and that was the last mistake she would ever make. The hospital in Calgary smelled like disinfectant and bad coffee. 3 weeks had passed since the crash. 3 weeks since search and rescue had finally found them in a hunting lodge 20 miles from the wreckage. 3 weeks of medical examinations and police interviews and media speculation. 3 weeks of Sienna Ashford sitting in emergency board meetings in New York, painting herself as the grieving colleague who had lost her CEO and her coworker to tragedy. 3 weeks of Margaret Thorne filing paperwork to assume control of Blackwell Antiquities in the absence of its missing leader. 3 weeks for them to think they had won. They were wrong. Isadora sat in a hospital bed that was too soft, wrapped in blankets that were too warm, staring at a television screen that showed her own face. Missing, when presumed dead. Memorial service planned for next week. Adrian stood by the window, hidden from the sunlight by heavy curtains. He had not left her side except to feed, discreetly, from blood bags he had compelled the night staff to provide. The bond between them hummed like a live wire. She could feel his tension, his rage building like a storm. They are dividing your life like spoils of war, he said quietly. His reflection in the dark window was pale as a ghost. Sienna has already moved into your office. Margaret is liquidating assets. The board votes in 2 months on permanent restructuring. Let them, Isadora said. Adrian turned. You are not angry? I am furious. She met his eyes. But anger without strategy is just noise. They think I am dead. That gives us an advantage. What kind of advantage? Isadora reached for her phone. The shattered screen had been replaced. The audio file had been uploaded to 3 separate cloud accounts. The kind where they hang themselves, she said, and we just hold the rope. The doctors cleared her for travel 2 days later. Bruised ribs, minor frostbite on her fingers and toes, dehydration and malnutrition. Nothing that time would not heal. They asked about Adrian, about how he had survived without a scratch, about how a man his size had carried her 20 miles through a blizzard. Isadora lied. She was getting very good at it. The private jet that carried them back to New York was not theirs. Adrian had made a single phone call from the hospital. Within hours, a plane had been arranged. No questions asked. No names recorded. When you were 700 years old, you accumulated favors and debts. Isadora watched Manhattan rise from the haze of distance as they descended. The city that had chewed her up for 3 years. The city that had whispered she was not good enough, not smart enough, not worth the oxygen she breathed. She was going to make it listen. Are you ready? Adrian asked. She could feel his concern through the bond, his desire to protect her from what was coming. But she did not need protection. She needed justice. I was born ready, Isadora said. They landed at Teterboro just after midnight. A car was waiting. Black, anonymous. It took them not to Adrian's penthouse in Tribeca, but to a brownstone in Brooklyn that looked like every other brownstone on the block. Safe house, Adrian explained as they entered. Owned through enough shell companies that even the syndicate cannot trace it. We stay here until the board meeting. When is it? 2 months from now. Margaret called emergency session to finalize the succession. Sienna will be named CEO. Your estate will be divided among existing partners. He paused. Unless you show up. Oh, I'll show up, Isadora promised. They spent the next 8 weeks in that brownstone. During the day that Isadora compiled evidence, pulled phone records, traced wire transfers, built a case so airtight that not even the best lawyers could wiggle free. During the night, Adrian taught her about his world, about the syndicate, about the vampire councils that governed the hidden populations, about the rules that kept his kind from being exposed. The night before the board meeting, Adrian disappeared. He left a note, 3 words in his elegant script. Trust me. Isadora did not sleep. could not sleep. The bond was stretched thin by distance. She could feel him moving through the city, could sense his purpose. When he returned at dawn, his eyes were bright with something that looked like savage satisfaction. "What did you do?" Isadora asked. "Made a few calls," Adrian said, "to people Sienna does not know exist, people who are very interested in the syndicate's activities in their territory." "What people?" "The kind who do not like it when humans traffic vampires." His smile was all teeth. "The kind who have been looking for Dr. Voss for a very long time." "You set them on Sienna?" "I gave them information. What they do with it is their choice." Adrian shrugged. "But I imagine Sienna Ashford is about to have a very bad morning." He was right. The news broke at 6 a.m. FB, a raid on a medical facility in New Jersey. Illegal genetic experimentation, human trafficking. 23 people arrested, including one Dr. Marcus Voss and a corporate executive whose name was being withheld pending investigation. Isadora watched the footage on her phone, saw the perp walk, saw Sienna Ashford in handcuffs, her blonde hair wild, her makeup smeared, screaming at the cameras that she was innocent, that she had been framed, that Isadora Navarro had orchestrated the whole thing. "She is not wrong," Adrian observed. "No," Isadora agreed, "but she cannot prove it." The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Isadora dressed carefully, a black suit that she had bought 3 years ago for her interview. The one that Sienna had sneered at, called cheap, called desperate. She wore it like armor. Adrian walked with her to the Blackwell building. They did not hide, did not skulk. They walked through the front entrance at 9:45, and the lobby went silent. Security guards stared. Receptionists gaped. A junior analyst dropped his coffee. Isadora Navarro was supposed to be dead, and yet here she was, alive, whole, walking toward the executive elevators like she owned the place. Because technically she did. The top floor was chaos. Assistants running between offices, phones ringing unanswered, and in the main conference room the board of directors assembled like vultures around a corpse. Margaret Thorne sat at the head of the table, 60 years old, steel gray hair, a face that had forgotten how to smile. She was reading from a prepared statement about leadership transitions and fiduciary responsibility. She looked up as the door opened. The statement fell from her hands. "Good morning, Margaret," Isadora said pleasantly. "I hope I'm not late." The room erupted, 12 board members all talking at once. Questions, accusations, demands for explanation. Adrian closed the door behind them, locked it, stood with his back to it like a sentinel. No one was leaving until this was finished. "How?" Margaret found her voice first. "You were dead." The search team said they found wreckage," Isadora interrupted. "They never said they found bodies, because we were not there to be found. We survived." She walked to the table, placed her hands flat on the polished surface. "Adrian protected me, kept me alive through 4 days in the wilderness, and then we were attacked." "Attacked?" This from James Chen, the company's general counsel. "By whom?" "By the syndicate." Isadora pulled out her phone, set it in the middle of the table. "By a paramilitary organization that traffics in supernatural assets, specifically vampires." Someone laughed nervously. Margaret's face went very still. "That is insane," she said carefully. "Is it?" Isadora pressed play. Sienna's voice filled the conference room. Crystal clear, undeniable. "Take them both. Blackwell is worth 50 million either way. The girl is expendable." Silence, the kind of silence that precedes an execution. "Where did you get this?" Margaret demanded. "From the syndicate's camp, where they held Adrian prisoner, where they planned to drain him and sell his blood on the black market." Isadora's voice was steady, cold. "The same camp that you approved funding for." She pulled out a second document, laid it on the table. Wire transfers, Margaret Thorne's signature. Payments to shell companies that all traced back to Dr. Marcus Voss. "You knew," Isadora said. "You knew Sienna was selling us out. And you helped her do it because you wanted Adrian gone, wanted me gone, wanted to install Sienna as CEO and take your cut of the syndicate's profits." Margaret stood. "This is defamatory. I will sue you for every— You will do nothing." Adrian spoke for the first time. His voice cut through the room like a blade. "Because I have already contacted the authorities. The same authorities who arrested Sienna this morning. The same authorities who are currently reviewing financial records that show you embezzled $17 million from this company over the past 5 years. Margaret's face went white. 17 million. Adrian repeated, and funneled through the same shell companies, the same accounts. You were not just complicit in the kidnapping attempt. You were funding your retirement with company money. And when Isidore and I disappeared, you saw an opportunity to cover your tracks. To blame everything on us and walk away clean. I did not. Enough. James Chen stood. He looked sick. Margaret, sit down. You are suspended from this board effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. Anything you say from this point forward should be to your lawyer. Margaret looked around the table, looking for allies, for support. She found none. The other board members would not meet her eyes. They were too busy calculating, too busy figuring out how to distance themselves from the scandal, how to save their own careers. Margaret grabbed her briefcase and walked to the door. Adrian did not move. I said you're suspended, James repeated. You need to leave. I am leaving, Margaret said. Her voice shook with rage, with humiliation. But this is not over. Isadora is a nobody, a librarian who got lucky. You cannot possibly think she can run this company. I don't think she can run this company, James said. I know she can, because Adrian Blackwell left a will, and in the event of his death or incapacitation, full ownership of Blackwell Antiquities and transfers to Isadora Navarro. Not Sienna, not you, her. He looked at Isadora with something that might have been respect. Welcome back, Miss Navarro, he said. We have a lot to discuss. The meeting lasted 4 hours. By the end of it, Isadora had been named interim CEO pending Adrian's full recovery. Margaret had been formally removed from the board, and criminal charges were being prepared against both Margaret and Sienna for conspiracy, embezzlement, and attempted murder. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Isadora felt hollow. She had won. She had exposed the people who tried to destroy her, had reclaimed her life. But the cost. 2 pilots dead, Adrian scarred by silver burns that were taking weeks to heal. Her own hands still ached on cold days where the blisters had been. You are thinking too much, Adrian said. They were in his office, his real office, the one at the top of the building with windows that looked out over all of Manhattan. Isadora stood at those windows now, watching the city that had tried to break her. I destroyed them, she said quietly. Margaret will go to prison. Sienna is facing federal charges, and I feel nothing. You feel everything, Adrian corrected. Guilt, anger, grief, relief. It is all there, all tangled up inside you. He came to stand beside her. Did not touch, just stood close enough that she could feel the cold that surrounded him. They made their choices, Isadora. You did not force Margaret to steal, did not force Sienna to sell us to the syndicate. You only held them accountable. That is not cruelty, that is justice. It does not feel like justice. No, it feels like survival, because that is what it was. You survived, despite everything they did, every obstacle they put in your path. You survived and came back stronger. Isadora looked at him, at the vampire who had been a statue 3 months ago, who was slowly remembering how to be human. I could not have done it without you, she said, and I would have died in that forest without you. Adrian finally reached out, touched her hand. We saved each other, Isadora. We are equals, partners, not savior and saved, just 2 people who chose each other when the world said we should not exist. The moment was broken by the sound of an explosion. 43 floors down, the lobby of Blackwell Antiquities erupted into chaos. Adrian was moving before Isadora registered what was happening. He pulled her away from the windows, shoved her behind his desk. Stay down, he ordered. What was that? Voss, Adrian's eyes were glowing red. The syndicate came for us. Another explosion, closer this time. The building shook. Isadora could hear screaming from the floors below. Hear the fire alarms starting to wail. We need to evacuate, she said. No, that is what they want, to drive us into the open, where they can grab us. Adrian pulled out his phone, sent a text. I am calling in reinforcements, but it will take time for them to arrive. How much time? Too much. The door to the office exploded inward, not blown open, kicked. The heavy oak door torn from its hinges like it was made of cardboard. Dr. Marcus Voss stepped through the wreckage. He looked nothing like the clinical scientist from the forest. His face was bruised, one arm hung in a sling, and his eyes burned with the kind of hatred that had nothing to do with science and everything to do with revenge. You cost me everything, he said. His voice was calm, conversational, like they were discussing the weather. My lab, my funding, 3 decades of research, all gone because of you. You kidnapped us, Isadora shot back. You tried to drain Adrian, to weaponize my blood. What did you expect? I expected gratitude. Voss pulled a syringe from his pocket. The liquid inside glowed faintly blue. Do you know what I could have given the world? Immortality, freedom from disease, from death. And you destroyed it because you could not see past your own small human concerns. You wanted to build an army, Adrian said. He stepped in front of Isadora, putting himself between her and the weapon. You wanted to create daywalkers, vampires who could hunt in sunlight. That is not salvation. That is extinction, for humans and vampires both. And yet you drank from her. Voss gestured at Isadora with the syringe. You created the very bond I was trying to synthesize. The connection that would allow vampires to share her immunity, her light. I drank to survive, Adrian said, not to conquer. There is a difference. No, Voss smiled. There is not. Survival is conquest. One organism dominating another. You are a predator, Blackwell. Stop pretending to be anything else. He lunged. Adrian met him. The fight was brutal. Voss was human, but he was enhanced. Drugs, Isadora realized. Performance enhancers that gave him strength, speed, reflexes that almost matched Adrian's. They crashed through furniture, shattered windows. Voss jabbed with the syringe. Adrian dodged, countered, drove his fist into Voss's ribs hard enough that Isadora heard bone crack. But Voss did not stop. He fought like a man who had nothing left to lose, who would rather die than fail again. The syringe connected, not with Adrian, with Isadora. She had moved without thinking, saw Voss aim for Adrian's neck, saw the killing blow coming, and stepped between them. The needle punched through her jacket, through her shirt, into her shoulder. Voss pressed the plunger. Blue fire erupted in her veins. Isadora screamed, fell. The world tilted sideways and she could not breathe, could not think, could not. Adrian stopped being careful, stopped being human, became exactly what Voss had accused him of being, predator. Adrian moved with speed that human eyes could not track. He grabbed Voss by the throat, lifted him off the ground, slammed him into the wall hard enough to leave a body-shaped crater in the drywall. What did you give her? Adrian's voice was not his own. It was something older, darker. The voice of a creature that had hunted humans for 700 years and was remembering why. Vampire serum, Voss gasped, synthesized from your blood. It will either turn her or kill her. 50-50 chance. No, Adrian shook him. She does not want this. She chose humanity. Like Catalina chose humanity. You do not get to take that from her. Too late, Voss wheezed. It is already in her system, already changing her. You can watch her die human or watch her become what you are. Either way, you lose. Adrian's fangs extended. For a moment, Isadora thought he would do it, would tear out Voss's throat and paint the office red. But he did not. Instead, he dropped Voss, let him fall. No, Adrian said. You do not deserve a quick death. You deserve to watch your life's work fail, to know you accomplished nothing. He turned to Isadora, dropped to his knees beside her. She was convulsing. The serum was fighting with her blood, with something in her DNA that recognized vampire and human both, and could not decide which to become. Isadora. Adrian took her face in his hands. Stay with me. Fight it. I do not. She could barely form words. I do not know how. Yes, you do. You fought a mountain lion, fought the cold, fought everyone who said you were not enough. This is just one more fight. Adrian bit his wrist, pressed the bleeding wound to her mouth. Drink, he commanded. My blood will stabilize you. Will keep you human, but you have to drink. Isadora drank, and the world exploded. She could feel everything, every heartbeat in the building, every breath, every flutter of fear from the people evacuating 40 floors below. Could feel the city beyond, the millions of lives moving through it like blood through veins. Could feel Adrian, not just through the bond, through the blood, through the connection that was older than language. The serum was not killing her, it was changing her. But not into vampire, into something new. The convulsions stopped. The pain faded. Isadora opened her eyes. The world looked different, sharper, colors more vivid, sounds more clear. She could see the individual dust motes floating in the air, could hear the hum of electricity in the walls, could smell the silver burns on Adrian's skin from weeks ago. What happened to me? She whispered. You balanced, Adrian said, wonder in his voice. The serum tried to turn you. My blood tried to keep you human, and your own DNA, the Catalina genome, found a middle ground. He helped her sit up. Across the room, Voss was laughing. Blood bubbled from his lips. Internal injuries from being slammed into the wall. Do you see, he gasped? Do you see what I could have created? She is perfect. Daywalker potential, human empathy, vampire strength, the perfect soldier, the perfect weapon. She is not a weapon, Adrian said coldly. She is a person. And you failed to understand that. Just like you failed to understand that evolution is not about domination. It is about adaptation. He stood, walked to where Voss lay bleeding. You wanted to build an army, Adrian said, but armies need soldiers who follow orders. And Isidora Navarro does not follow anyone. Police sirens wailed in the distance. The reinforcements Adrian had called were arriving. Vampire Council, human authorities, everyone converging on the Blackwell building. Voss would be taken, tried, imprisoned in facilities that humans did not know existed. He had lost, and he knew it. Kill me, Voss said. Please, do not let them take me. No, Adrian said simply. You wanted immortality. Let me give you a taste. You will spend the next 60 years in a cell beneath the earth. No sunlight, no freedom, no research. Just time, all the time in the world to think about what you did. He turned his back on Voss, returned to Isidora. Can you stand? He asked. She could. Her legs were steady, her breathing even. Whatever the serum had done, it had not taken her humanity. It had enhanced it. 5 months became a blur of healing. Sienna's trial, guilty on all 63 counts. Sentencing scheduled for 2 weeks. The lawyers predicted 16 years minimum. Margaret's plea deal, guilty to embezzlement, 16 years. No possibility of parole. Her letter from prison arrived 3 days later. One sentence. I underestimated you. Isidora burned it without responding. The board named Isidora permanent CEO, not interim, permanent. And on a winter evening in the Swiss Alps, Adrian Blackwell knelt in the snow with a wooden box in his hands. Isidora stood on the balcony of the chalet, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. The cold did not bite the way it used to. She was not vampire, but she was not entirely human anymore either. Her heart still beat. Her blood was still warm, but she was faster, stronger, could go days without sleep. The serum had made her something new, something that did not have a name yet. You are thinking too loudly, Adrian said. He emerged from inside, opened the box. Inside was a ring, not diamond, obsidian and silver twisted together in patterns that looked organic, alive. And set in the center was a stone that Isidora recognized from the portrait, Catalina's ruby. 527 years ago, Adrian said, I made a promise to a woman I loved. I promised her forever. And I failed. I let her die because I was too afraid to fight for what we had, too willing to let her make the choice for both of us. He looked up at Isidora. I am not making that mistake again. You are not Catalina. You are Isidora Navarro. You are brilliant and fierce, and you saved my life in more ways than I can count. And I am asking, not as a vampire, not as a king, but as a man who has been alone for too long, will you marry me? Isidora stared at the ring, at the man kneeling in the snow, at the future that was being offered. She thought about 3 years of being invisible, of being dismissed, of being told she was not enough. She thought about a plane crash in a forest and blood shared under firelight. She thought about the bond that tied them, that would tie them until death, hers or his. It did not matter which. Yes, Isidore said, to all of it. Forever, yes. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Some things were meant to be. The wedding was small, 3 months later. 8 months after the crash that had changed everything. Isidora had no family left. Adrian had outlived everyone he had ever known. So they gathered the people who mattered, James Chen and the board members who had stood by her. The Vampire Council representatives who had helped clean up the syndicate mess. A handful of employees who had always treated her like she was human instead of furniture. The ceremony was held at sunset, that liminal space between day and night where Adrian could stand in the fading light without pain. Isidora wore crimson, the color of the House of Cordoba, the color of blood and life and defiance. And when the officiant asked if she took this man, this creature, this impossible being to be her partner, she did not hesitate. I do. Adrian's vows were simpler. I cannot give you the sun, he said, his voice carried across the small gathering. I cannot grow old with you or give you children or promise that this will be easy, but I can give you the moon, the stars, every night of forever that I have left. And I swear to you, Isidora, that I will spend every one of those nights making sure you know that you are seen, that you matter, that you are loved. He slid a second ring onto her finger, twin to the first. Always, he promised. The reception was held in a ballroom that had seen kings and queens and emperors. Crystal chandeliers threw light across marble floors. Musicians played songs that were older than most countries. And Isadora danced, not well. She had never learned. Had never been to a wedding, never been asked to a school dance, never had reason to know how to move to music. But Adrian led, and she followed. And it did not matter that half the guests were vampire, that the other half were human, that the world outside this room would never understand what they were. What mattered was this: two people who had found each other in the wreckage, who had chosen each other when every logical reason said they should not, who had survived. When the music slowed, when the lights dimmed, when they stood together on the balcony, looking out at mountains that had witnessed centuries, Isadora thought about the girl who had walked into Blackwell Antiquities 3 years ago. Invisible, dismissed, told she was nothing. She had been wrong, and so had they. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked. "That I used to be nobody," Isadora said. "And now I'm everything." "You were always everything." Adrian pulled her close. The world just needed to catch up. Somewhere in a federal prison, Sienna Ashford sat in a cell and counted the years she would never get back. Somewhere else, Margaret Thorne did the same. And in a ballroom in the Swiss Alps, two people who should not exist proved that sometimes the impossible was just the inevitable waiting to happen. "I love you," Isadora said. 3 words she had never said to anyone. 3 words that meant surrender and victory and trust all at once. Adrian smiled, really smiled, the kind of smile that made him look human and young and happy. "I know," he said. "I can feel it. Every second. And I love you too." He touched her face. Cool skin, no heartbeat. "For however many years we have, whether that is 60 or 600, you are mine, and I am yours." The sun set over the mountains. The first stars appeared like promises. And two people who had started as nothing became everything, the way it was always meant to be.